everybody, Melissa Welsh here, national award-winning photographer and founder of Pixel Sense. Today I'm going to take a moment to explain to you what a cents per pixel rate is. So, the first thing you need to know is that your cents per pixel rate is what is going to help you place a value on your intellectual property. You see, traditional pricing formulas in the photographic industry look something like this, where you take your cost of goods sold and you times it by 4. But you never hear an artist talking about marking up their paints and canvas to come up for a price for their artwork. And time again, we hear people in the industry talk about how the value isn't in the paper, the value's in the image. So it sort of seems silly that over the years we've been placing a value on our work based on the cost of the paper. So if the value isn't in the paper, why have we been doing that? So, you can see how our industry got into a bit of trouble with the introduction of digital files. The original formula doesn't work so well because if your time is associated with your cost of doing business and gets wrapped up in a session fee, and there are no cost of goods sold involved in the product, does that mean your files don't have a value? Because 0 plus 0 times 4 equals 0. And that's why I wanted to come up with something that I could use with everything. So when pricing my products, I use this. Time, and this is where your cost of doing business comes into play. Your cost of goods sold, so that would be things like prints, mounting, framing, shipping, any outsourcing. You'll get this information from your vendor invoices or your price list. And then there's your IP, or your intellectual property. And that's what we're going to use the Pixel Sense formula for. The cool thing about this formula is that you can use it for every type of photo use. The formula is the value of the image equals the longest side of the photograph in pixels times a cents per pixel value assigned to the image. The price is, of course, the result. The px length will be decided by your customer, but your CPP rate is decided by you. How do you choose your cents per pixel rate? Good question. So it depends. Now, there are generally two types of photo use. There's personal and commercial. Personal use, the way that I remember it, is personal use is for memories and commercial use is for money. Within the personal category, you have two subcategories, prints and files. In the commercial category, you have three subcategories, advertising, branding, or editorial. So advertising is used for selling a product or service. Branding is used to tell a company's story or build a company's reputation. That would also, social media would go into that branding category there. And then editorial is used to tell a story. So let's talk a little bit more about personal use. This is for all of you wedding and portrait photographers out there. The first thing you will do is identify with one of three photographer types. Emerging pro, so typically 5 years or less experience in the industry, still working on developing their style and finding their niche. An established pro, so 5 years plus in the industry, running a part-time or full-time business with overhead costs, insurance, association dues, all that fun stuff. Or a specialist, so somebody who's recognized as an expert in a particular field of work. And then we give you a suggested rate. You can find the full range of rates in the ebook, book, or in the Pixel Sense software. But for example here, you can see on the screen that if you're an emerging pro and your cents per pixel rate was 3 cents per pixel, for a 1200 pixel length file, you'd be charging $36 to your client. If you're a specialist, that same file size might be $108 for that particular file size. So this chart here is just to give you a little bit of an idea of what those rates might look like. But again, the concept being that every pixel has a value. So even for people that are just getting started in the industry, if you have no idea what to charge, even if you're an amateur photographer, you know that if somebody wants your photo, you should at least start at 1 cent per pixel, right? That's the basis of the formula, is that we've monetized the pixel. So that's why assigning a value to our intellectual property is so important to the long-term success of our industry. The value is directly related to the quality of the image and our experience in the industry. So before we go any deeper into the pricing bit, just let's review the industry standard for selling digital files to your portrait and wedding clients. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you restrict the file size. So just because our cameras give us these great big giant files doesn't mean that that's what we need to deliver to our client. We can still deliver our client a high-res file if we choose, but it doesn't have to be the full res file. So there's a difference between high res and full res. Okay, so we want to restrict the file size. We want to indicate the terms of use in a release form, and you can get one of those on the website. It's a freebie in our resource center. You want to watermark or print mark the files, and so you want to make sure that everybody knows what a watermark is, but some people are not as familiar with a print mark. So just like if you were printing a fine art image, you would sign the front. If you're delivering a high-res image, you want to make sure that you have a digital signature on the front of that file. And then, of course, use the PixelSense formula to value your files appropriately. Lastly, you want to communicate the value to your client. So this is something that I wrote, and I'll make sure that there is a version of this that you guys can just copy and paste in this blog post, but I'm going to read it to you here quickly. Our digital file collections are one of the most precious items we sell. Once the files are released to you, you're able to share these photos with an unlimited number of people forever. If you have purchased a print-ready file, you are able to print copies for all the people in your life whenever you need. As with all of our products, these images grow more valuable as time passes. Please make sure to back up your files. All right, so moving on to commercial photography. So after using the PixelSense formula for a while, I started to wonder if it could be used on the commercial side of the business. Actually, the truth is I was imagining teaching commercial pricing to a lot of the emerging pros and thought about how complicated it was. I compared all the different resources out there, and pricing was all over the map. Masterfile, Capic, Pickerels, PhotoQuote. There had to be a simpler way. So this is why the PixelSense formula works, because in today's day and age, the size of the file is all we need to dictate the type of image use. So in this case, your CPP, your cents per pixel value, will be based on industry ranges and averages with a standard image license. What's a standard image license? Well, here you go. So for personal, it's unlimited, non-exclusive. Advertising is one-time non-exclusive. Branding or corporate use is 3-year non-exclusive. And editorial is one-time non-exclusive. If your client wants image use outside of these standards, you know you need to raise your rate. Just as a reminder, licensing is necessary because you own the rights to your images by law. You own the copyright. And by the means of a contract, you license specific rights to the client that wants to use the images. Okay, so now these are the rates that you would charge your clients based on the size of photograph they have requested to license. The CPP industry rates have been compiled from many different sources, including Getty, Capic, Pickerels, etc. Here's an example of advertising. And what we've done is we've given you the low, the average, and the high in each category. So you know that if somebody is requesting a certain type of use, you know the absolute minimum amount of money that you should take for that photo. And then depending on a number of other factors, you can decide where in that range. Maybe for that particular image, you should be closer to the average or the high price. Which brings us to our next slide. So here's some of the things that you can ask yourself when choosing the rate. The answer will be different to each one of these questions with every single image and every single situation. So some of the questions I always ask myself is, how original is the photograph? Does every photographer in town have the same shot? You know, if it's a dewdrop on a leaf and somebody wants to pay you money for it, I'd be pretty happy with the minimum because, probably everybody on your block has that same shot. So take whatever you can get. But if the shot is more unique or shot with a less common lens from a different perspective or with spectacular light, this makes the image more valuable and therefore commands a higher price. So you can see now how the formula will work for your assignments, time, cost of goods sold, or expenses plus your intellectual property. It works for stock. So there's no time, no cost of goods sold with stock, so you're just left with your intellectual property, commercial licensing, print products, digital files, everything. PixelSense is the contemporary method of pricing your photography. And so for all those wedding and portrait photographers out there who sometimes get a commercial job, maybe they get 1 or 2 commercial jobs a year, now they understand how to price their photos or their images or that job or whatever it is. It's the same for every single job. If you want more information on the Pixel Sense formula, I actually wrote a book a couple of years ago that dives way deeper into this, gives you a whole lot more background information and information on how to use the formula, business strategies, business models, and how all of that sort of stuff does play a role in your business. So you can get that at pixelsense.com in the resource section there. And please make sure if you've got any questions, you let me know. Thanks very much. Cheers.